At my cousin's engagement dinner at the Alinea, one of Chicago's most expensive restaurants, the room went dead silent. My cousin Brittany pointed a manicured finger at me and laughed into the microphone, saying, "I hope I never end up like her, a single mom with a fatherless kid." The room erupted in cruel laughter. My Uncle Richard leaned back and shouted that men do not want used goods. I stood there clutching my purse while my own mother looked away in shame. But they did not know one thing. The groom Jamal was not just marrying into their family, he was my employee, and I had the power to shut down this entire celebration with a single text message. Before I tell you how I wiped those smiles off their faces, please hit subscribe and like this video if you have ever been underestimated by your own blood. My name is Audrey. I am 34 years old, and to my family I am nothing more than a cautionary tale. A single mother who works from home doing odd jobs, a stain on their pristine reputation. That night at the Alinea was supposed to be the happiest night of Brittany's life. She was marrying Jamal, the CEO of Apex Systems, a tech company that had just gone public. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle Richard were beaming, thinking they had finally secured a wealthy son-in-law to cover their mounting debts. I arrived 20 minutes late because my babysitter canceled last minute, and I had to drop my son Leo off at a neighbor's house. I rushed into the private dining room, wearing my simple beige trench coat and flat shoes, looking nothing like the other guests in their sequins and tuxedos. The moment the heavy oak doors closed behind me, the jazz music stopped. Brittany was standing on the small stage holding a champagne flute and a microphone. She spotted me instantly. Her eyes lit up with that familiar malicious glint I had known since childhood. She tapped the microphone twice. "Oh look, everyone, the guest of honor has finally arrived. Our resident charity case." The room turned to look at me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my head high. Brittany continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Audrey, I hope you did not bring your stack of discount coupons tonight. We do not use those here. This is a $500 a plate dinner, not the drive-thru you are used to." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. I saw my Aunt Patricia cover her mouth to hide a smirk. I simply tightened my grip on my clutch, feeling the weight of the black titanium card inside. The card that could buy this entire restaurant. I walked toward the only empty seat in the back, but Brittany was not done. She looked at Jamal and laughed. "You see, honey, this is why I tell you we need to be careful. One wrong move in life and you end up alone and bitter wearing last season's coat to a black tie event." As the waiters circulated the room pouring Dom Perignon into crystal flutes, the atmosphere shifted from awkward silence to a buzzy anticipation. Brittany held her glass high, the bubbles catching the light of the chandeliers. She looked like the perfect bride to the outside world, radiant in her designer dress. But I knew the rot that lived beneath that silk. She cleared her throat, demanding absolute silence. To my wonderful fiancé Jamal, she began, her voice trembling with a practiced emotion that I recognized from years of her manipulating our grandmother. "You are everything a woman could ask for. Successful, handsome, and most importantly, honorable." She paused for effect, letting her gaze drift slowly across the room until it landed squarely on me again. I felt the collective weight of 50 pairs of eyes follow her line of sight. "It is such a relief!" Brittany continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was amplified by the microphone, to know that I made the right choices. I did not throw away my future. I did not burden my family with a fatherless child. And I certainly did not become well-used goods. The term hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Used goods. That was what they called me behind my back. I saw my Aunt Patricia nod in agreement, sipping her champagne as if her daughter had just recited a piece of poetry, rather than insulting her own niece. My Uncle Richard chuckled, a low rumbling sound that made my skin crawl. To them, my value had evaporated the moment I became a mother without a ring on my finger. They saw my son Leo not as a blessing, but as a depreciation of an asset. I tightened my grip on the stem of my water glass, imagining it shattering in my palm. The urge to scream, to flip the table, to announce that I could buy and sell everyone in this room 10 times over was overwhelming. But I did not move. My face remained a mask of indifference, a skill I had honed over decades of being the scapegoat. Next to Brittany, Jamal was not smiling. His hands were clenched into fists on the white tablecloth, his knuckles turning ashen. He stared at his future wife with a look of dawning horror, as if seeing a monster shed its human skin. I saw his chair scrape against the floor as he prepared to stand up. He was ready to defend me. He was ready to tell them that the woman they were mocking was the only reason he was standing there today. I caught his eye immediately. I gave him a microscopic shake of my head. No, not yet. Let her finish. Let her dig the hole so deep that she can never climb out of it. Jamal froze, torn between his loyalty to me and his role in this charade. He slowly settled back into his chair, but the warmth had left his eyes. He looked down at his plate, unable to look at the woman he was supposed to marry. Brittany, oblivious to the storm she was brewing, raised her glass higher. To making the right choices, she chirped. The room echoed, to the right choices. I lifted my water glass and took a sip. Oh yes, Brittany. You have no idea how right my choices are about to become. Just as Brittany finally lowered her glass, satisfied with her performance, my Aunt Patricia decided it was her turn to twist the knife. She adjusted her pearl necklace, a nervous habit she had whenever she was about to say something particularly venomous, and turned to the table at large. It is not entirely Audrey's fault, she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. That was somehow worse than Brittany's open hostility. We all remember how difficult it was for her when she had to drop out of Stanford. We had such high hopes for her academic future, but I suppose some girls are just not cut out for the discipline of higher education. She looked at me with a tragic expression. It was just too much for you to handle, wasn't it, dear? Especially with your, shall we say, personal entanglements. The entire table nodded solemnly. They all believed the family legend that I had dropped out because I was overwhelmed, pregnant, and incapable of keeping up with the coursework. They had no idea that I left Stanford because I had already secured seed funding for my first algorithm, and staying in class felt like losing money. I had chosen to build an empire while they were still debating which fraternity parties to attend. But I let them have their narrative. It was the shield that allowed me to operate in peace. My Uncle Richard, emboldened by his wife's commentary, leaned heavily on Jamal's shoulder. The smell of expensive scotch wafted across the table. Son, you have to be careful, Richard said, his voice booming with the arrogance of a man who believes his own hype. You are marrying into the good side of the family, thank God, but you need to watch out for the influence from that side. He gestured vaguely in my direction with a breadstick. That branch of the family tree has rot in the roots. Quitting is in their DNA. Laziness is a genetic trait, just like blue eyes or male pattern baldness. Do not let that failure mindset infect your business or your future children. Jamal stiffened under Richard's hand. I saw his jaw clench so hard a muscle popped in his cheek. He looked like he was about to shove Richard's hand off his expensive suit jacket. To hear the man who barely managed a failing construction company give business advice to a tech CEO was laughable, but to hear him insult me was unbearable for Jamal. Just as Jamal opened his mouth to shatter their delusion, my phone buzzed against my leg. It was a single vibration, distinct and urgent. I glanced down at the screen, keeping my movements subtle. It was a message from my vice president of operations. The notification read simply, "The merger is finalized. The acquisition of Omnicorp is complete. We are ready to announce whenever you are." A rush of adrenaline surged through my veins. That merger was worth $400 million. It solidified Apex Systems as the market leader in the Midwest. While my uncle was calling me a failure with bad genes, I had just closed a deal that was worth more than his entire life's earnings combined. I unlocked my phone and typed a 2-word reply. Wait. Signal. I slipped the phone back into my purse and looked up at Uncle Richard. I offered him a small, tight smile. Thank you for the advice, Uncle Richard, I said softly. I will be sure to remember exactly what you said about failure tonight. The dinner finally wound down, ending with the clinking of dessert spoons and the loosening of ties. When the waiter approached our table, he held the leather bill folder with both hands, placing it significantly in the center of the centerpiece. My Uncle Richard snatched it up before Jamal could reach for it. He opened it, scanned the total, and let out a low whistle. Then his eyes snapped to me. He did not pass the bill to Jamal. Instead, he slid the folder across the tablecloth until it hit my water glass with a sharp thud. "Since you are the eldest cousin," Richard said, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, "and considering you did not bother to bring a gift to your own cousin's engagement, I think it is only fair you cover the table. Consider it your contribution to the family." I looked down at the bill. $4,500. It was an exorbitant amount for a Tuesday night dinner, but for me, it was negligible. However, it was the principle. I looked at Richard calmly. "I was invited to a dinner, Uncle. I was not told this was a fundraising event. And typically the host pays." Richard's face turned a shade of purple. "Do not talk back to me about etiquette. You are sitting here drinking expensive wine and eating steak on our time. If you cannot afford it, just admit you are broke and maybe we will take pity on you." Before I could respond, Brittany chimed in, leaning her head on Jamal's shoulder. "Oh, Daddy, stop it. You know she cannot afford that. That is probably 3 months of rent for her little apartment." She looked at me with mock sympathy. "It is okay, Audrey. Jamal can get it. We can write it off as a charitable donation to the needy." Something inside me snapped. Not a loud snap, but a quiet, cold one. I did not look at Brittany. I did not look at Richard. I looked straight at the waiter who was shifting uncomfortably, witnessing this family abuse. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a card. It was not a debit card. It was not a standard credit card. It was a solid block of black anodized titanium. No numbers on the front. Just my name engraved in silver. I held it out. The waiter's eyes widened slightly. He knew exactly what that card was. It was an invite-only card for high-net-worth individuals with no spending limit. He took it with both hands, treating it like a holy relic. "I will take care of that right away, ma'am," he said, his tone shifting from polite to reverent. Richard watched the transaction with a confused scowl. He had never seen a card like that before. He scoffed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. Flashy piece of plastic. Probably one of those predatory credit cards with a 30% interest rate. Digging yourself deeper into debt just to show off. Pathetic. I watched the waiter walk away to process the payment. Let them think it is debt. Let them think I am drowning. It will make the moment they realize I own the ocean that much sweeter. The ladies' room at the Alinea was a sanctuary of marble and gold, quieter than a cathedral. I turned on the brass faucet, letting the cold water run over my wrists, trying to wash away the feeling of my uncle's contempt. I looked at myself in the expansive mirror. The woman staring back was not the broken, struggling single mother they thought she was. She was a shark in beige clothing. Just as I reached for a cloth towel, the door swung open with aggressive force. Brittany stormed in the train of her white dress, sweeping across the tiled floor. The moment the door clicked shut, her mask fell. The blushing, demure bride vanished, replaced by the mean girl who used to lock me in the basement when we were children. She marched up to the sink next to mine, not to wash her hands, but to corner me. She leaned in close, the scent of her expensive perfume overpowering the room. "You need to listen to me very carefully, Audrey," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You need to stay away from Jamal. Do not think I did not see the way you were looking at him out there." I turned slowly to face her, keeping my expression bored. "I have no idea what you are talking about, Brittany. I was looking at the man who is about to become family." "Do not play dumb with me," she snapped, gripping the edge of the marble counter until her knuckles turned white. "I know exactly what you are doing. You see a successful, wealthy man and your gold-digging instincts kick in. You think because you paid one bill with some maxed-out credit card that you can sit at the grown-up table? You are pathetic." She took a step closer, invading my personal space. "Jamal is out of your league. He is a CEO. He is royalty. You are just a sad, desperate single mom with a kid that nobody wants. You are a toad trying to jump onto a swan's back. Keep your distance, or I will make sure you are not just uninvited from the wedding, but cut off from this family permanently." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the rage. She was terrified. She knew deep down that she was marrying a man she did not understand for money she did not earn. I calmly folded the cloth towel and placed it in the wicker basket. I smoothed the lapels of my trench coat, checking my reflection one last time. Brittany. I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. You are so focused on guarding the gate that you forgot to check who owns the castle. I would worry less about me and more about keeping your seat as the CEO's wife. It is a very slippery position if you do not have the character to back it up. I walked past her, my shoulder brushing against her white dress. I left her standing there staring at her own angry reflection in the mirror, wondering if she had just heard a threat or a prediction. She would find out soon enough that it was both. 2 weeks before the wedding, my phone lit up with a demand, not a request. It was Aunt Patricia. Come over immediately, she texted. Family emergency. I actually canceled a scheduled video conference with my legal team in Silicon Valley, thinking something terrible had happened to my grandmother. I drove 40 minutes to their sprawling estate in Lake Forest, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the front door was unlocked. I walked into the foyer and stopped dead in my tracks. There was no medical emergency. There were no paramedics. Instead, the formal living room looked like a high-end stationery store had exploded. Boxes of heavy cream-colored cardstock were stacked floor to ceiling. Ribbons, wax seals, and glitter were scattered across the Persian rugs. Sitting in the middle of this chaos, sipping an iced tea, was Aunt Patricia. She did not look distressed. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. "Oh, good, you are finally here," she said, not bothering to look up from her clipboard. "You made good time. I suppose that old Honda of yours can still move when it needs to." I stood there clutching my car keys, feeling the adrenaline fade into annoyance. "Aunt Patricia?" I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You said it was an emergency. I left work for this." Patricia let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "Work? Oh, please, Audrey. Let us be honest with each other. You work from home. You do those little freelance gigs on the internet. It is not like you have a real boss or a schedule to keep. You have all the free time in the world." She gestured grandly to the mountain of boxes. "We fired the calligrapher this morning. She wanted to charge us $3 an envelope. Can you imagine the robbery?" So I told Brittany not to worry. I said, "We have Audrey. She has nice handwriting, and she certainly owes this family a favor after that stunt she pulled with the credit card at the engagement party." I stared at the boxes. There must have been at least 500 invitations there. This was a job that would take a professional days to complete. "You want me to handwrite 500 wedding invitations?" I asked, clarifying the absurdity of the request. "Yes, and do not use your normal scribbles," Patricia commanded, finally looking me in the eye. "I want elegant cursive script. Use the gold ink pens on the table, and please wash your hands before you touch the paper. This is Italian cardstock. It costs more than your weekly grocery budget, so do not ruin it with grease stains." I felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but I also felt something else. Amusement. My hourly consulting rate was $2,000. If she had kept the professional calligrapher, it would have cost her $1,500 total. By forcing me to do it, she was technically using up tens of thousands of dollars worth of my time for free. It was the most expensive mistake she could possibly make, and she had no idea. I walked over to the table and picked up a pen. "Fine," I said. "I will do it. But remember this moment, Aunt Patricia. Remember when you thought my time was worthless." I looked at the mountain of envelopes and then at my watch. I actually had a board meeting with the directors of Omnicorp in 20 minutes. It was the final vote on the acquisition, a deal that would reshape the tech landscape of Chicago. I could not be sitting here playing secretary for my aunt. "Aunt Patricia," I said firmly, "I cannot do this right now. I have a scheduled video conference with a client that I absolutely cannot miss. I can come back this weekend, but I have to go." I turned to grab my purse, ready to walk out the door. Before I could take a step, a voice rang out from the top of the spiraling staircase. "So your little freelance client is more important than my wedding." Brittany descended the stairs slowly, her hand gliding down the mahogany banister. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than the car she thought I drove. She stopped at the bottom step, blocking my path to the door. "If you walk out that door, Audrey, do not bother bringing Leo to the wedding. In fact, do not bother bringing him to the rehearsal dinner or Thanksgiving or Christmas." I froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Brittany knew exactly where to hit me. She knew that despite everything, I wanted my son to know his cousins. I wanted him to feel like he belonged to a family, even if that family was flawed. Leo had been practicing walking with a pillow on his head for weeks because he was so excited to be the ring bearer. He had told his entire first-grade class about it. Brittany took a step closer, seeing the hesitation in my eyes. She smiled, a cruel, tight expression that showed too many teeth. "Do you want your son to be the outcast, Audrey? Do you want him to be the only kid left out of the family photos? The only one not invited to the parties? If you cannot contribute to this family, why should your son reap the benefits of being part of it? We only support those who support us." The room felt suddenly suffocating. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was my assistant, asking where I was for the pre-meeting prep. I had a choice. I could leave, assert my dominance, and reveal my true status right now. But if I did that, I would blow my cover before the wedding. I would lose the element of surprise, and more importantly, Leo would be heartbroken today. He would not understand why he couldn't wear his little tuxedo. I looked at Brittany, then at Aunt Patricia, who was watching with amused indifference. They were holding a 6-year-old boy hostage to get free labor. It was despicable, it was low, and it was exactly why they deserved everything that was coming to them. I slowly released the grip on my purse strap. I took a deep breath, swallowing my pride. "Fine," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I will write the invitations." But Leo walks down that aisle, and he sits at the family table. Brittany clapped her hands together, her face instantly shifting back to a mask of cheery innocence. "Perfect, I knew you would see reason. The pens are on the table. Try not to smudge them." I pulled out my phone and texted my assistant under the table, "Handle the vote without me. I have a situation." Then I sat down at the dining table, picked up the gold pen, and began to write. Each loop of the cursive script felt like a promise of vengeance. They were forcing a multimillionaire to work as their scribe, thinking they had won. But as I wrote the names of the guests, I was not just addressing envelopes. I was listing the witnesses to their upcoming destruction. For the next 3 hours, the only sound in the room was the scratching of my pen against expensive Italian paper and the drone of Brittany's voice discussing luxury resorts. I sat at the kitchen island, hunched over the stack of envelopes, my hand cramping as I perfected every loop of the calligraphy. I was their indentured servant, the poor cousin paying off a debt of existence. 10 feet away in the sun-drenched living room, Brittany and Aunt Patricia lay sprawled on the cream sofas, flipping through glossy brochures for overwater bungalows in the Maldives. Brittany held up a photo of a resort that cost $5,000 a night. "I think we should go for the platinum package," she said lazily, examining her manicure. "The one with the private butler. I do not want to lift a finger on my honeymoon. Jamal can afford it. He just needs to work a little harder this quarter." Patricia nodded in agreement, sipping her third iced tea. "Absolutely, darling. You deserve the best. Do not let him be cheap with you. Men need to be reminded that high-value women require high maintenance." They did not offer me a glass of water. They did not ask if I needed a break. To them, I was just part of the furniture, a machine designed to output perfect invitations. But what they did not know was that while my right hand was writing addresses for their guests, my left hand was managing a portfolio that could buy that entire island resort. I tapped the small Bluetooth earbud hidden under my hair. It was a direct line to my broker in Geneva. I kept my voice barely above a whisper, switching seamlessly into fluent French, a language my family did not know I spoke because they never cared to ask about my education. "Oui, la volatilité est élevée," I murmured, keeping my eyes on the envelope I was addressing. "Vendez la position complète sur Omnicorp maintenant. $2 millions. Yes. Volatility is high. Sell the full position on Omnicorp now, $2 million. $2 million. Patricia looked up from her magazine, frowning. "What are you mumbling over there, Audrey? Are you complaining?" I looked up, my face the picture of innocence. "No, Aunt Patricia. Just listening to a language-learning podcast. Trying to improve myself like you said." Brittany let out a cruel laugh. "A little late for that, isn't it? You can learn all the languages you want. You are still going to be working gig jobs forever." Just focus on the invites. If you mess up one name, you are paying for the reprint. I returned my gaze to the paper. Dans le compte offshore s'il vous plaît, I whispered into the mic. Confirmez la transaction. In the offshore account, please. Confirm the transaction. My broker confirmed the sale. In the 30 seconds it took Brittany to choose a swimsuit color, I had just netted a profit that was 4 times the cost of her entire wedding. I signed the last envelope with a flourish, placing it on the finished stack. The irony was delicious. They treated me like the help, completely unaware that the servant was the only sovereign in the room. I picked up the next envelope, smiling as I wrote the name. I could play this game. I could play it better than anyone. The front door opened with a soft click, but I did not look up. I was on envelope number 240, and my hand was beginning to cramp. I assumed it was Aunt Patricia returning to criticize my penmanship or demand I work faster. Instead, a pair of polished Italian leather loafers stopped right next to my chair. The scent of sandalwood and expensive cologne filled the air. It was Jamal. He looked around the living room, taking in the chaotic assembly line of envelopes, ribbons, and wax seals. Then he looked down at me, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. Brittany told me she was ready, he said, his voice tight. She told me you were just helping out a little with the organization. He reached out and picked up a finished envelope, inspecting the gold calligraphy. This is not helping out Audrey. This is indentured servitude. She is at the spa, I said, dipping the pen into the inkwell without breaking my rhythm. She said the stress of planning was getting to her, and her hands were too cramped to even text you. Jamal let out a sharp sigh and pulled out the chair opposite me. He sat down, checking over his shoulder to ensure the house was truly empty. When he turned back to me, the deferential fiancé mask was gone. In its place was the sharp, decisive look of the man I had hired to run my company. Boss, he whispered, using the title that would have given my aunt a heart attack if she heard it. Why are you doing this? Why are you letting them treat you like a hired hand in a house that you technically own? I can end this right now. One phone call to the holding company, and I can have their lease terminated for violation of the subletting clause. We could evict them before dinner. I paused, the pen hovering over the paper. It was a tempting offer. To see Aunt Patricia and Brittany thrown out on the street clutching their designer bags would be satisfying. But it was too small, too quick. I looked up at him and shook my head slightly. No, I said softly. We play the long game. We stick to the plan. If we strike now, they play the victim. I want them to expose themselves completely. I want there to be no doubt in anyone's mind who they really are. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Did you sign the prenuptial agreement Richard drafted? Jamal nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. I did. This morning. Richard was practically drooling when he handed it to me. He thinks he locked down 50% of my assets for his daughter no matter what happens. He did not even read the addendum I slipped in. And the specific clause I told you to include, I asked. Clause 14b, Jamal recited. If either party is found to have knowingly misrepresented their financial standing, debts, or assets prior to the union, the marriage is immediately null and void, and all assets remain with the original owner. He chuckled darkly. They were so busy counting my money they forgot to hide their own debts. Good, I said, returning to my writing. Keep that document safe. It is going to be the most valuable wedding gift you receive. Now go. If they find the groom fraternizing with the help, they might get suspicious. Jamal stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked at me with a mixture of admiration and fear. You are terrifying. You know that. I know, I said, signing another envelope with a flourish. That is why you work for me. Now get out of here before the bride comes back and asks you to pay for her facial. The curtain to the fitting room swept open, and I stepped out onto the pedestal feeling like a shapeless blob. While the other bridesmaids were dressed in sleek, tailored rose gold gowns that accentuated their figures, Brittany had selected a special design just for me. It was a billowing, ruffled sack in a muddy shade of beige that washed out my skin tone completely. The fabric hung off my frame, making me look 20 pounds heavier and 10 years older. The shop assistant, a kind woman with a pin cushion on her wrist, immediately rushed over. "Oh, honey," she said, frowning at the excess fabric bunching around my waist. "This is at least 3 sizes too big. We need to take this in immediately. It is drowning you. She reached for the fabric to pin it for alterations. Stop! Brittany's voice cut through the air like a whip. She was standing on the main podium looking radiant in her $12,000 lace wedding gown. Do not touch it. The assistant paused, confused. But miss, it does not fit her. It looks unfinished. It is fine, Brittany said, waving her hand dismissively while sipping complimentary champagne. We are not spending extra money on alterations for her. Besides, it is better that way. Audrey is self-conscious about her body. You know the mom bod. She looked at her friends who giggled on cue. After she had that kid, her stomach just never bounced back. Lots of loose skin and stretch marks. It is better to keep it covered up so she does not embarrass herself or ruin the aesthetic of my photos. I stood there, my hands clenched at my sides. I worked out with a private trainer 4 times a week. I was in the best shape of my life. But I could not defend myself without revealing that I could buy this entire bridal salon. I had to swallow the insult. Brittany wasn't done. She pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Come here, Audrey, she commanded, pointing to the floor. My train is bunched up. Fix it. I want to do a live stream for my followers. I stepped off the pedestal, the heavy polyester of my ugly dress swishing around my ankles, and walked over to her. I lowered myself to my knees. As I began to smooth out the layers of intricate lace on her train, Brittany hit the record button. Hey guys, she chirped, her voice pitching up an octave. Just at my final fitting. Look at this dress. It is perfection. And look, my cousin Audrey is being such a sweet little helper. Say hi, Audrey. She angled the phone down. I looked up from the floor, forcing a tight smile. From her angle, I looked submissive, small and defeated, a servant at the feet of a queen. Brittany laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. She tries so hard, poor thing. Anyway, I cannot wait for the big day. As I smoothed the hem of her gown, my fingers brushed against the price tag she had not removed yet. I knew exactly whose credit card had paid for this. Jamal's. Which meant effectively, I had paid for the dress that she was using to humiliate me. I patted the fabric, gently smoothing it out. Enjoy the spotlight, Brittany. Enjoy standing above me while you can. Because when the rug gets pulled out, you are going to have a very long fall. While Brittany was busy preening for her live stream, Aunt Patricia walked over to where I was kneeling. She looked down at me with a mixture of pity and disdain, shaking her head as if I were a lost cause. You know, Audrey? She began, her voice low enough so the shop assistants wouldn't hear. It really is a shame. You had so much potential when you were younger. But look at you now. On your knees, fixing the hem of your younger cousin's dress. She gestured toward Brittany, who was now posing with a glass of champagne. Look at her. That is what success looks like. Brittany understands how the world works. She knows that a woman's greatest asset is her ability to secure a future. She chose Jamal, a CEO, a man who is going places. By next year, she will be on the board of charities, traveling to Paris for Fashion Week and living the life of a queen. Patricia leaned in closer, her expensive perfume suffocating me. And you are still scraping by with those little internet jobs, counting coupons, worrying about rent. You chose the hard way, thinking you could do it alone without a man. And what do you have to show for it? A child with no father figure and a bank account that I assume is constantly overdrawn. You are a warning sign to other women, dear. A cautionary tale of what happens when you don't play your cards right. I stood up slowly, dusting off my knees. I looked Patricia in the eye. Success is defined differently by everyone, Aunt Patricia, I said calmly. Some people marry it, some people build it. Patricia scoffed. Don't be naive. Money is money, and Brittany is about to have a lot more of it than you ever will. She is marrying the CEO of Apex Systems. Do you even know what kind of power that is? She will be untouchable. You will spend the rest of your life hoping she invites you to dinner just so you can eat a decent meal. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my ugly beige dress. It was the notification I had been waiting for all morning. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from Patricia's prying eyes. It was a secure email from the Apex Systems Board of Directors. The subject line read, Quarterly Shareholder Update Confirmation of Majority Ownership. I opened the attachment. The pie chart on the screen was clear as day. Jamal Williams, 20%. Public shareholders, 29%. Audrey Vance, via Vance Holdings, LLC, 51%. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face for the first time that day. Patricia mistook it for submission. "That is right, Smile," she said condescendingly. "Be happy for her. It is the only way you will get to stay close to the money." I locked my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. "You are right, Aunt Patricia," I said, my voice filled with a dangerous cheerfulness. "Brittany is marrying the CEO, but you should probably remind her that even CEOs answer to someone, and usually that someone is the majority shareholder." Patricia frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," I said, turning back to the changing room. "Just business. I will see you at the Hamptons. Make sure Brittany packs something warm. I hear it gets very cold at the top, but it is even colder when you are stripped of everything." The weekend in the Hamptons was intended to be a celebration of Brittany's upcoming nuptials, a final fling of freedom, before she tied the knot with a man whose bank account she loved more than his soul. For the other 6 girls, it was a vacation of sun sand and bottomless mimosas. For me, it was an exercise in physical endurance and public humiliation. We pulled up to the rental property, a sprawling modern estate made of glass and steel that overlooked the ocean. Before the engine of the limousine had even cooled, Brittany was already out the door, her entourage trailing behind her in a cloud of expensive perfume and excitement. I reached for the door handle, ready to join them, but Brittany turned back, her sunglasses sliding down her nose. "Audrey, wait," she commanded. "The driver has a bad back. You need to bring the bags in. All of them. And be careful with the Louis Vuitton trunks. They are vintage." I stood on the gravel driveway staring at the pile of luggage. There were 5 massive suitcases, plus vanity cases and hat boxes. It looked like the baggage claim of a transatlantic flight. While the other girls shrieked with delight as they ran toward the infinity pool, I began the grueling task of hauling their vanity up the winding stone staircase. The sun was beating down on my back. My arms burned as I lifted 2 of the monogrammed trunks at once, the leather handles digging into my palms. I could hear the pop of a champagne cork from the terrace above, followed by the clinking of glasses and raucous laughter. I was sweating in my sensible t-shirt and jeans, feeling less like a family member and more like a pack mule. As I reached the top of the stairs, gasping for breath, I stumbled into the pool area. The girls were already lounging on the white daybeds, stripping down to designer bikinis. One of Brittany's friends, a girl with hair so bleached it looked like spun sugar, looked up at me over the rim of her sunglasses. She nudged Brittany with her elbow. "Oh wow, this place comes with staff," she asked, gesturing at me with her flute. "That is so convenient. I need someone to steam my silk wrap later." The group erupted in giggles. Brittany did not correct her immediately. She took a slow sip of her drink, savoring the moment. "No, silly," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "That is not the maid. That is my cousin Audrey." The friend looked confused, eyeing my sweaty forehead and the bags in my hands. "Oh, why is she carrying everything?" Brittany waved a hand dismissively. "She is used to hard work. Audrey is what do you call it again? A virtual assistant. She does little online tasks for people. Data entry, scheduling, that sort of thing. It pays pennies, but it keeps the lights on in that little apartment of hers. Barely." I set the heavy bags down on the patio with a loud thud, correcting my posture to stand as tall as possible. "Actually, I run a private equity portfolio," I wanted to say, but I bit my tongue. "Oh, bless her heart," the friend said, looking at me with genuine pity now. "It is good of you to bring her along, Britt. Give her a taste of the good life." I gripped the handle of the suitcase again, my knuckles white. Yes, a taste of the good life. They had no idea that the virtual assistant standing before them had a net worth that could buy this villa, bulldoze it, and build a skyscraper in its place without taking out a loan. I dragged the bags toward the house, their laughter following me like a swarm of bees. Keep laughing, I thought. Enjoy the champagne, because the hangover I am about to serve you will last a lifetime. That evening we dined at the Ocean House, an establishment where the menu did not list prices, and the air smelled of sea salt and old money. We were seated at the best table on the patio, overlooking the crashing waves. The waiter, a young man in a crisp white tuxedo, approached us with the reverence reserved for royalty. Brittany did not even look at him as she ordered. She pointed a manicured finger at the most expensive item on the menu. "We will start with the Grand Seafood Tower," she announced. "And then I will have the Lobster Thermidor. And bring us 3 bottles of your vintage Cristal." Her friends followed suit, ordering Alaskan king crab legs, seared scallops, and Wagyu surf and turf. The order probably totaled more than $2,000 already. When the waiter finally turned to me, I opened my mouth to order the grilled salmon. I was starving after hauling their luggage up 3 flights of stairs. Actually, Brittany interrupted, cutting me off before I could speak. "She will just have the house salad, no croutons, dressing on the side, and just tap water for her." I looked at Brittany, stunned. "I am actually quite hungry," I said. "I think I will have the fish." Brittany reached across the table and patted my hand, her touch cold and patronizing. "Oh, honey, no. You are watching your figure, remember? We were just talking about how you want to lose that stubborn baby weight before the wedding photos. You do not want to look bloated in that dress." She turned to the waiter, her smile dazzling. "She is on a very strict budget diet. And waiter, please make sure to separate her bill from ours. We will split the cost of the champagne and the seafood tower among the 6 of us, but we do not want to burden my cousin with costs she cannot afford. It is better if she just pays for her lettuce." The table erupted in murmurs of agreement. "That is so thoughtful of you, Britt," one friend cooed. "You are always looking out for her." The waiter looked at me with pity in his eyes, scribbling down the order for a $12 salad, while my tablemates ordered feasts fit for kings. I simply nodded, letting my hand fall back to my lap. For the next 2 hours, I watched them gorge themselves. I watched them crack open crab legs, the butter dripping down their chins. I watched them toast with crystal flutes, laughing about inside jokes I was not part of. I sat there picking at a bowl of wilted iceberg lettuce, my stomach rumbling audibly. They treated me like a charity case, someone they had to feed just enough to keep alive but not enough to enjoy life. They thought they were being benevolent by letting me pay for my own starvation. I took a sip of my tap water and looked out at the ocean. "Enjoy the lobster, Brittany, because very soon you will be choking on it." When we returned to the sprawling estate, the air was filled with the sound of zippers unzipping and heels clicking on marble floors as the girls ran to claim the best bedrooms. I stood in the foyer waiting for instructions, exhausted from the physical labor and emotional battery of the day. Brittany walked down the grand staircase, a glass of water in hand, wearing a silk sleeping mask pushed up on her forehead. She looked at me with feigned surprise, as if she had forgotten I was there. "Oh, Audrey," she said, pausing on the bottom step. "We have a tiny logistical problem. I realized we only have 6 bedrooms, and well, there are 7 of us." I looked at the house. It was a mansion. I knew for a fact it had 8 bedrooms because I had looked up the listing on Zillow earlier. 2 of the rooms were likely being used for luggage or massage tables. "I suppose I can share a room with someone," I suggested, though the idea made my stomach turn. Brittany laughed, a sharp barking sound. "Share. Oh no, the girls need their privacy. We all have beauty routines, and you know we need our space to decompress. Besides, nobody really feels comfortable sharing a bathroom with you. It is nothing personal, just preferences." She gestured vaguely toward the open-plan living room. "The sofa is actually Italian leather. It is probably more comfortable than whatever mattress you have at home. You can sleep there." I looked at the beige sectional. It was in the middle of a high-traffic area with 0 privacy. "Just one thing," Brittany added, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. "That sofa is a $40,000 piece of furniture. Please do not get any makeup on it, and try not to sweat on the leather. If you damage it, we lose the security deposit, and I really do not want to have to ask you for money I know you do not have." She turned on her heel and glided back up the stairs. "Good night, cousin. Try not to snore." I stood in the dark living room, listening to the sounds of my family and their friends settling into plush, king-sized beds upstairs. I could hear muffled laughter and the sound of a television. I took off my shoes and lay down on the cold leather sofa, using my coat as a blanket because Brittany had not offered me one. I stared up at the high vaulted ceiling. Shadows danced across the wooden beams. My back ached, and the leather was sticky against my skin. I closed my eyes, but sleep was impossible. Instead of tears, I felt a burning heat rising in my chest. It was not sadness. It was pure distilled rage. I visualized my bank account balance. I visualized the prenup Jamal had signed. I visualized the look on Brittany's face when the hammer finally dropped. They thought they were putting me in my place by making me sleep on a couch. They did not realize they were just giving me more time to perfect their eviction. I lay there in the dark, my eyes wide open, watching, waiting, and plotting. The sofa was uncomfortable, but the revenge would be luxurious. The next evening, the villa transformed into a private nightclub with a hired DJ and a private chef serving hors d'oeuvres. For the first time all trip, I decided to stop hiding. I showered off the grime of the day and pulled out the one garment I had packed for myself. It was a midnight blue slip dress, cut on the bias from vintage Japanese silk. To the untrained eye, it was simple. To anyone who knew fashion, it was a bespoke masterpiece that had been draped on my body by a master tailor in Milan. It cost more than the Honda Civic Brittany thought I drove. I walked down the floating staircase. The music was thumping, but as I descended, heads turned. For a moment, nobody recognized the woman in the exquisite gown as the poor cousin who had hauled luggage earlier. I felt powerful. I felt like myself. Brittany was holding court by the fireplace wearing a sequined mini dress that was loud and aggressive. When she saw me, her smile faltered. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on the way the silk caught the light. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She realized that for this one moment, I was outshining her. She could not allow the help to look like the mistress of the house. She grabbed a large glass of dark red Cabernet from a passing tray and marched toward me. Her walk was unsteady, feigning intoxication, but her gaze was laser-focused. "Audrey," she shouted over the bass, "you look comfortable. Is that a nightgown?" Before I could answer, Brittany lunged forward. She pretended to trip over an invisible unevenness in the perfectly smooth marble floor. With a theatrical gasp, she thrust her hand forward. The entire contents of the wine glass launched onto my chest. The cold liquid soaked instantly into the delicate silk, spreading like a dark bloodstain across my torso. The music seemed to stop. The room went silent. I stood frozen, feeling the wine drip down my legs, ruining a $15,000 garment in a split second. Brittany covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with mock horror. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I must have tripped. I am so clumsy tonight." She reached out to touch the wet fabric, then pulled back as if disgusted. Well, at least it wasn't one of the expensive dresses. "That looks like polyester blend, right? It should wash right out in the sink, or you can just throw it away. I am sure you got it at a discount store anyway." She looked down at the red puddle spreading on the white marble floor near my feet. Her expression shifted from fake apology to genuine command. "Actually, since you are already wet and messy, maybe you can be a dear and clean this up. We don't want the guests slipping. Grab some paper towels from the kitchen and wipe down the floor. It is kind of your job, isn't it? Cleaning up after people who matter." The other girls giggled nervously. I looked down at the ruined silk. I looked at the puddle. And then I looked at Brittany. She wanted me on my knees, scrubbing the floor while she stood over me. It was a power play. I took a deep breath, calculating the cost of my dignity versus the satisfaction of the final reveal. I decided to save my ammunition. "No problem," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I will clean it up." I walked to the kitchen, head held high, leaving a trail of red drops behind me. Let her think she won this round. Let her think she destroyed something cheap. She had just destroyed a piece of art, and soon I would destroy her entire world. The morning of our departure was shattered by a scream that echoed off the high glass walls of the villa. It was Brittany. I was in the kitchen packing up the leftover artisanal cheese because I hate waste regardless of my bank account balance. Suddenly, Brittany stormed into the room, her face flushed with panic. "My diamond tennis bracelet is gone!" she shrieked. "The vintage Cartier one. It was on the nightstand and now it is gone." Aunt Patricia followed close behind, her eyes scanning the room like a predator seeking weak prey. She did not look under the sofas. She did not ask if the housekeeping staff had been in. Her gaze locked directly onto me. "Nobody leaves this house," Patricia announced, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "That bracelet is worth $25,000. It does not just vanish into thin air, unless of course there is someone in the house who is desperate for money." I set down the box of crackers I was holding. "Aunt Patricia," I said calmly, "I have been downstairs for 20 minutes. I have not been near Brittany's room." Patricia marched over to me, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. "Do not lie to me. I saw the way you looked at her jewelry all weekend. It is only natural, I suppose. When you have nothing, the temptation to take from those who have everything must be overwhelming. Only the poor succumb to such petty greed." She reached out and grabbed the strap of my canvas tote bag, which was sitting on the counter. I stepped forward to stop her. "You cannot search my bag. That is my personal property." Patricia laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "I can do whatever I want. You are under my roof. If you are innocent, you have nothing to hide. Unless you are afraid of what we might find." Before I could react, she yanked the bag away from me. With a violent motion, she turned it upside down and dumped the contents onto the marble floor. My humble belongings scattered everywhere. A worn paperback book, my keys, a bottle of water, and my folded trench coat. And then, as if in slow motion, something sparkled. Sliding out from the deep pocket of my trench coat, the diamond bracelet fell onto the tiles with a distinct metallic clink. It lay there glittering in the sunlight, damning me in the eyes of everyone present. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Brittany gasped, covering her mouth with both hands in a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Audrey, how could you? I trusted you." Patricia looked down at the bracelet and then up at me, her face twisted in triumph. She did not look surprised. She looked validated. "I knew it," she hissed. "I knew you were rotten. You did not just come here to help. You came here to steal. You thought you could pawn this and pay off your debts, didn't you?" I stared at the bracelet. I had not worn that coat since we arrived. Brittany must have slipped it into the pocket the night before, perhaps when I was on my knees cleaning up her wine mess. It was a setup. A clumsy, malicious frame job designed to destroy the last shred of my dignity. I looked at Brittany, who was struggling to hide a smirk behind her manicured hands. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to beg. But as I looked at that stolen jewelry, I realized they had just handed me the final weapon I needed. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have stammered out excuses, tears streaming down their face, begging for their family to believe them. But I am not most people. I looked down at the diamond bracelet glinting on the cold tile floor, then slowly raised my eyes to meet Brittany's. She was waiting for the breakdown. She wanted the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Instead, I gave her nothing. My pulse did not race. My hands did not shake. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. I bent down and picked up the bracelet. I held it out, not to Aunt Patricia, but to Brittany. "The game is over when I say it is over," I said, my voice dropping to a register so low it vibrated with authority. "You want to play games with my reputation? Fine, let us play." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I did not hesitate. I dialed Jamal's number and hit the speaker button. The ringing sound echoed through the silent kitchen. Brittany's smirk faltered slightly. "Who are you calling?" Aunt Patricia demanded, stepping forward. Jamal picked up on the second ring. "Hey boss, what's up? I thought you were on the road back." "Jamal," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Brittany. "We have a situation here at the villa. Brittany's $25,000 bracelet somehow found its way into the pocket of my trench coat. Aunt Patricia seems to think I stole it." On the other end of the line, Jamal's voice turned serious. "What? That is ridiculous." "I know," I continued smoothly. "But since we are all about truth here, can you do me a favor? Log into the villa's security system remotely. There is a camera right above the fireplace in the living room where my coat was hanging all night. I noticed the red recording light was on. Why don't you pull up the footage from, say, 2 a.m. last night? We can see exactly whose hands put that jewelry in my pocket." The color drained from Brittany's face faster than water from a drain. She looked like she was going to be sick. She knew exactly what that camera would show. It would show her creeping downstairs in her silk robe, slipping the bracelet into my coat, framing her own cousin for a crime. "No," Brittany shrieked, lunging forward. She grabbed my hand and mashed the red end call button on the screen. "Brittany," Patricia yelled. "What are you doing? Let him check. We can prove she did it." Brittany turned on her mother, her eyes wide with panic. "No, Mom, it is fine. We found it. That is what matters. We do not need to bother Jamal with this. He is busy." She turned to me, her chest heaving. "Consider yourself lucky, Audrey. I am letting this go because today is a travel day and I do not want the drama. But if I ever see you near my jewelry again, I will call the police myself." She snatched the bracelet from my hand and stormed out of the kitchen. Patricia looked at me, then at the retreating back of her daughter, confusion clouding her features. She sensed something was wrong, but her denial was too strong. I put my phone back in my pocket. "You might want to go help her pack, Aunt Patricia," I said. "She seems very stressed." And stress leads to mistakes. As Patricia hurried away, I allowed myself a small smile. I did not need the footage. I knew there was no camera in the living room. The red light she saw was just the smoke detector. But the guilt, that was real. And now I owned her fear. The rehearsal dinner was held in the conservatory of the city's botanical gardens, a glass structure filled with exotic orchids and the humidity of a rainforest. It was suffocatingly hot and impeccably expensive. I stood near the entrance, holding my son Leo's hand. He was vibrating with excitement. At 6 years old, he did not understand the politics of this family. He only knew that he was the ring-bearer, a title he whispered with the reverence of a knighthood. I had dressed him in a miniature black suit that I had tailored specifically for him. He looked dashing, a tiny gentleman amidst a sea of sharks. "Mommy, look!" Leo squealed, pointing across the room. "It's Jamal!" Before I could stop him, Leo broke free from my grip and ran across the polished stone floor. I held my breath, waiting for someone to scold him to tell him to stop running. But Jamal turned around, his face lighting up when he saw my son. "Hey there, little man," Jamal called out. Leo skidded to a halt in front of him, beaming. "Look at my tie, Jamal. I look just like you. You look better than me." Jamal laughed. He swooped down and effortlessly hoisted Leo onto his shoulders. Leo giggled, holding onto Jamal's head, towering over the crowd of stiff, wealthy guests. For a moment, the tension in the room dissolved. Jamal spun him around slowly, making airplane noises, and Leo's laughter echoed off the glass walls. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. But in my family, joy is unauthorized unless it is approved by the board. Jamal. Put him down immediately. My Uncle Richard marched across the room, his face flushed with irritation. He looked at Leo perched on Jamal's shoulders, not as a child, but as a stain threatening a masterpiece. Richard reached out and gripped Jamal's arm. "Are you insane? That tuxedo is custom-made Italian silk. It costs $3,000. Do not let that child climb all over you like a jungle gym. He probably has chocolate on his hands or dirt on his shoes." Jamal stopped spinning. His smile faded, replaced by a tight, polite expression. "He is fine, Richard. He is just a kid. And he is the ring-bearer. We are just bonding." Richard scoffed, looking at Leo with open disgust. He is wrinkling the shoulders. "We have photos in 10 minutes. I will not have you looking disheveled because you decided to play babysitter. Besides," Richard lowered his voice, but not enough to hide the venom, "it does not look right. The CEO of Apex Systems carrying him. It sends the wrong message. He belongs at the children's table in the corner, not parading around on your shoulders." I stepped forward, my maternal instincts flaring up like a wildfire. I saw Leo's smile falter. He sensed he was unwanted. He looked down at me, his eyes wide and confused. Jamal slowly lowered Leo to the ground. He adjusted his suit jacket, then looked Richard dead in the eye. "I think he looks great," Jamal said coldly. Richard ignored him and shooed Leo away with a flick of his hand. "Go to your mother, boy, and try not to touch anything else. Everything in here is worth more than your education." I took Leo's hand, pulling him close to my side. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, smoothing his hair. "You are the most handsome boy here." But inside I was screaming. They had insulted me for years, but now they were starting on my son. They had just crossed a line they could never uncross. Leo, trying to obey his uncle's harsh command to get away from Jamal, turned too quickly on the polished stone floor of the conservatory. His little patent leather dress shoes, which I had polished just that morning, lost traction on the slick surface. He stumbled forward, his arms flailing for balance. It happened in slow motion. To catch himself, he grabbed onto the nearest solid object. Unfortunately, that object was the cascading train of Brittany's white silk rehearsal gown. He landed on his knees, his hands planting firmly on the delicate fabric to break his fall. It was a harmless accident, a clumsy moment of a 6-year-old boy. But as he scrambled to stand up, the rubber sole of his shoe left a faint gray scuff mark on the hem of her dress. It was a smudge no larger than a dime, something that a dab of club soda could have removed in seconds. But to Brittany, it was as if he had set the building on fire. A scream pierced the humid air, sharp and hysterical, shattering the polite hum of conversation and causing the string quartet to stop playing abruptly. Brittany looked down at her dress, her eyes bulging as if she were witnessing a murder. She grabbed the fabric, pulling it up to her face. "You ruined it!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with rage. "You stupid, clumsy brat! Look what you did! This is custom silk!" Leo, terrified by the noise, froze. He looked up at her, his eyes welling with tears, his mouth trembling as he tried to form an apology. "I am sorry, Auntie," he whispered. "I slipped." Brittany did not hear him. She did not care. The veneer of the blushing bride evaporated completely, replaced by a monster consumed by vanity. She did not check if the child was hurt. She did not act like an adult. In a flash of blind, vanity-fueled rage, she extended her manicured hands and shoved my 6-year-old son backward with full force. "Get off of me," she screamed as she pushed him. Leo was small for his age. He did not stand a chance against the strength of a grown woman fueled by adrenaline. He flew backward, his feet leaving the ground for a fraction of a second before he crashed hard onto the unforgiving stone floor. His head hit the tiles with a sickening thud that echoed through the silent room. For a heartbeat, the entire world stopped. The guests gasped in unison. Jamal took a step forward, his face draining of color. I felt my heart stop in my chest. My son lay on the floor, stunned and silent for a terrifying second, before the pain registered, and he let out a wail that tore through my soul. Brittany stood over him, breathing heavily, smoothing her dress, seemingly more concerned with a speck of dust than the child she had just assaulted. She looked around the room, expecting sympathy for her wardrobe, completely unaware that she had just committed the act that would seal her fate. The sound of my son hitting the floor was followed by a silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then came the scream, not from the injured child, but from the woman who had pushed him. As Leo curled into a ball, sobbing and clutching his knee, I hit the ground beside him, my expensive silk dress scraping against the stone. I pulled him into my arms, checking his head for injuries, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Brittany did not offer a hand. She did not ask if he was bleeding. She stood above us like a vengeful deity, her face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness that no amount of professional makeup could hide. She pointed a shaking finger at my 6-year-old son, her chest heaving with indignation. "Look what you did," she screeched, her voice cracking. "You uneducated little brat. Do you have any idea how much this lace costs? It is imported from France. But I guess I should not expect anything less from a child raised in a barn." Brittany Jamal started to shout, stepping forward, but she spun on him, her eyes wild. "Do not you dare defend him, Jamal. Look at my dress. It is ruined. This is what happens when you let low-class people into high-class places." She turned her venom back to me and Leo. Her eyes locked onto my son, who was burying his face in my neck, shaking with terror. She sneered, delivering the blow that would echo in my nightmares. "Your mother clearly did not teach you any manners. But then again, what can we expect? You are just a fatherless mistake, a destructive little bastard who ruins everything he touches." The word bastard rang out through the glass conservatory, bouncing off the orchids and the crystal chandeliers. It was a slur from a different era weaponized to inflict maximum damage on a child who did not even understand its meaning. The gasp from the guests was audible. Even the waiters froze with their trays. Brittany stood there, panting, feeling justified in her cruelty. She saw a damaged hem. I saw a damaged soul. She had just attacked the only thing in this world that mattered to me. She had called my son a bastard in front of the entire Chicago elite. I felt Leo stiffen in my arms. He stopped crying, his little body going rigid with shame. He looked up at me, his tear-filled eyes searching for an explanation. Why is she yelling, "Mommy? Am I bad?" I wiped a tear from his cheek with my thumb. "No, baby," I whispered, my voice trembling, not with sadness, but with a rage so cold it burned. "You are perfect." I slowly stood up, lifting Leo into my arms. I felt the weight of him solid and warm. I turned to face Brittany. She was still checking her dress, muttering about dry cleaning bills. She had no idea that she had just signed her own social and financial death warrant. She had not just insulted me, she had declared war on my child. And for that, I would burn her kingdom to the ground. I stood there clutching my sobbing son to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. The echo of the slur Brittany had used was still vibrating in the air. I looked up, searching the faces of the people who shared my blood. I looked at my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Richard. Surely this was the line. They had watched me be humiliated for years, but this was a child. A 6-year-old boy, who had just been physically assaulted by a grown woman. "Uncle Richard," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage, "are you going to say nothing?" "She just pushed him. She just called your grandnephew a bastard." Richard slowly swirled the ice in his Scotch glass. He looked at Brittany, who was fake crying over her dress, and then he looked at me with eyes cold as flint. He did not look at Leo. "Brittany is under a lot of stress, Audrey," Richard said, his tone bored. "And honestly, she has a point. You brought an unruly child into a high-stakes environment. What did you expect would happen?" I stared at him, unable to comprehend the level of moral bankruptcy standing before me. "He is 6, I whispered. "It was an accident." "There are no accidents at this level of society." Richard snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. "There is only incompetence. And you have raised him to be incompetent. He is a liability, just like his father was, just like you are." He took a step closer, towering over me. "You need to get him out of here, immediately. I will not have that thing running around tomorrow ruining the aesthetic of the wedding. We have senators coming. We have investors coming. I cannot have a bastard child tripping over the bride and making us look like trash. He is a stain on this family, Audrey. A walking, talking embarrassment." I felt the air leave my lungs. A stain. That was what my son was to them. Not a person. Not a family member. A stain. I turned to Aunt Patricia, the woman who had knit me a blanket when I was born. "Aunt Patricia." Patricia sighed, checking her diamond watch as if I were wasting her precious time. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Audrey. Don't look at me like a wounded puppy. Richard is right. You should have hired a nanny. Or better yet, left him at home." She waved her hand toward the exit, a gesture of absolute dismissal. "Take him home. And honestly, do not bother bringing him back tomorrow. In fact, maybe it is better if you do not come to the ceremony either until the reception. We do not need the drama. It is humiliating enough explaining your situation to our friends without having it on display. Go. Get out of my sight." The finality of her words hit me like a physical blow. They were not just asking me to leave the party. They were erasing me. They were telling me that my existence and the existence of my son was an inconvenience they could no longer tolerate. I looked down at Leo. He had stopped crying and was just trembling, burying his face in my neck. He understood the tone, if not the words. He knew he was being rejected. I tightened my hold on him. The sadness that had been threatening to overwhelm me evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard clarity settled in. They had just severed the last thread of loyalty I had. They had chosen their side. They had chosen the dress over the boy, the image over the blood. I stood up straighter, adjusting Leo in my arms. I did not argue. I did not beg. I looked at Richard, then at Patricia, memorizing their faces in this moment of cruelty. "Understood," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "We will go." I turned my back on them. As I walked toward the glass doors, leaving the humid, suffocating air of the conservatory, I felt lighter than I had in years. Because now I had no reservations, no guilt, no mercy. They wanted me gone. Fine. But when I came back tomorrow, I would not be coming as their poor cousin. I would be coming as their executioner. I remained on my knees for a moment longer, not out of weakness, but to ensure my son was steady. I brushed the dust from his small black trousers, my hands moving with methodical precision. The tears that had threatened to spill over moments ago had evaporated, replaced by a dry, arid heat in the center of my chest. It was the feeling of a bridge burning, the final structural support of familial obligation collapsing into ash. I looked into Leo's eyes. They were wide and frightened, searching my face for a cue on how to react. I gave him a smile that did not reach my eyes, but was enough to comfort him. "Here are the keys," I said softly, pressing the heavy fob into his small palm. "Go to the car. Unlock it and get in the back seat. Turn on the iPad. I will be there in exactly 2 minutes. And then we are going to get ice cream, 3 scoops, even the chocolate one." Leo sniffled, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Really, Mommy? Really?" I confirmed, smoothing his hair one last time. "Now go, run." I watched him scamper out of the glass conservatory, his small footsteps fading into the distance. I waited until the heavy glass door clicked shut behind him, ensuring he was out of earshot, ensuring he was safe from the toxicity that poisoned the air in this room. Then, and only then, did I stand up. I smoothed down the front of my dress. I rolled my shoulders back, feeling the tension lock into a cold, hard armor. I turned slowly to face them. Brittany was still fussing over her hemline, muttering about lawsuits and incompetence. Aunt Patricia was reapplying her lipstick in a compact mirror, as if she had not just evicted her own blood. Uncle Richard was pouring himself another scotch, his back to me, dismissing my existence entirely. They looked so comfortable in their cruelty. They thought they had won. They thought they had discarded the trash. They had no idea they had just armed a nuclear warhead. I walked toward them. My heels clicked on the stone floor, a sharp, rhythmic sound that cut through their murmuring, like a metronome counting down. I stopped 3 feet away. Richard turned around, looking annoyed. "I thought I told you to leave." I looked at him. I looked at Patricia. I looked at Brittany. I did not blink. My face was a mask of granite. "I am leaving," I said, my voice dropping to a register so low and cold it made the hair on Brittany's arms stand up. "But before I go, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take a mental snapshot of this moment. I want you to remember exactly how powerful you feel right now. Remember the words you used. Remember the way you looked at my son." Patricia scoffed, snapping her compact shut. "Oh, spare us the dramatic speech, Audrey. Go home." I ignored her. I leaned in slightly, my eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that finally made her flinch. "Remember it well," I continued, "because tomorrow when the sun goes down, you are going to look back on this moment and you are going to wish you had torn your own tongues out before you spoke to us like that. You are going to wish you were mute." I let the threat hang in the humid air for a second, watching the confusion flicker in their eyes. Then, without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and walked away. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew exactly what was coming. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the fallout. I was the one pushing the button. As the heavy glass doors swung shut behind Audrey and Leo, I stood frozen in the center of the conservatory. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from a rage so pure it felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. I watched the woman I was supposed to marry dust off her hands, as if she had just taken out the trash, not physically assaulted a 6-year-old boy. I took a step toward the door, my instincts screaming at me to run after Audrey to apologize on behalf of these monsters, to make sure Leo was okay. But before I could take a second step, a hand clamped down on my forearm. "Where are you going?" Brittany asked, her voice shrill and demanding. She dug her nails into my suit jacket. "Leave her. She is just doing this for attention. She wants to ruin my night." I looked down at her hand on my arm. It looked like a claw. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. This was not the woman I thought I knew. This was a stranger wearing a bride's costume. I ripped my arm away from her grip with a force that made her stumble back in her heels. "Do not touch me," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Brittany blinked, shocked by the physical rejection. "Jamal, what is wrong with you?" It was just a little push. He was ruining the dress. I looked at her with undisguised disgust. "You are worried about a dress. You just hurt a child, Brittany. You called him a bastard. Who are you?" Brittany rolled her eyes, crossing her arms defensively. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. You are just stressed about the wedding. Come have a drink and forget about them. They are nobody." I backed away from her, shaking my head. I could not breathe in the same room as her. "I need air," I choked out. I walked away, ignoring her calls, ignoring Richard's glare. I walked until I found a quiet corner in the garden hidden by a wall of ivy. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I typed the message to Audrey, my thumbs hitting the glass hard. "I can't do this. I can't marry her. I am going to end it right now. I am going to go back in there and cancel the whole thing. I am sorry." The three dots appeared instantly. Then the reply came through, glowing in the darkness. "No. Do not cancel. If you cancel now, they just look like victims of a cold feet groom. I want them exposed. I want them destroyed in front of everyone they care about. Proceed with the wedding. Tomorrow, execute Plan B exactly as we discussed. Trust me." I stared at the screen. Execute Plan B. It was the nuclear option. It was the option that would not just end the relationship, but obliterate their social standing and financial future in a single afternoon. I looked back at the conservatory, where Brittany was laughing with her friends, completely unbothered by her cruelty. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Fine. If she wanted a show, she would get a show. I typed back a single word. Understood. I put the phone away and adjusted my tie. I would walk back in there. I would play the part of the dutiful fiancé for 24 more hours. And then I would watch them burn. The drive home was silent. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my mind was moving at 100 miles an hour. When we finally pulled into the driveway of my modest suburban home, I carried a sleeping Leo inside, careful not to wake him. I laid him gently in his bed, tucking the duvet around his small shoulders. His breathing was soft and rhythmic, a stark contrast to the chaos and cruelty we had just escaped. I kissed his forehead right above where a tear had dried on his cheek and walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I went straight to my home office. To the outside world, this was where I did my little freelance jobs. In reality, it was the command center of a financial empire. I moved the framed poster of the Chicago skyline on the wall to reveal a biometric safe. I pressed my thumb against the scanner. The light turned green and the heavy steel door clicked open. Inside lay the truth of who I was. Stacks of bonds, deeds to properties across the state, and a thick leather binder embossed with the Apex Systems logo. I pulled the binder out. It was heavy, filled with the legal framework that I had built 5 years ago. It contained the original incorporation papers, the shareholder agreements, and the irrevocable trust documents that proved I was not just an investor, but the majority owner of the very company my family was trying to marry into. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I initiated a secure video call. The screen flickered to life, revealing 3 men in suits sitting in a conference room in New York. My legal team. "Good evening, Ms. Vance," the lead attorney said. "We did not expect a call this late. Is everything proceeding according to schedule?" I opened the binder to page 42. Section 14. C. Change of control. Execute the clause. I said, my voice cutting through the digital silence like a blade. "I want the transfer of executive power finalized by noon tomorrow. Prepare the press release." The headline should read, "Majority shareholder of Apex Systems steps out of the shadows." The attorney looked surprised. "Are you sure, Audrey? Once we do this, there is no going back. Your anonymity will be gone." I looked at the binder. I thought about the way Brittany had pushed my son. I thought about Uncle Richard calling him a stain. I thought about Aunt Patricia dismissing our existence. "I am sure," I said. I want the paperwork ready for signature at the reception and ensure that the termination letters for the current management structure of the subsidiary are drafted. I will be delivering those personally. Understood, the attorney said. We will see you at the venue. I closed the laptop. The room fell silent again. I walked back to Leo's room and sat on the edge of his bed. I looked at his bruised knee, now purple and swollen. A surge of protective fury washed over me. I brushed a stray hair from his face. I am sorry, baby, I whispered into the darkness. I am sorry I let them treat you like that. I am sorry I tried to play nice for so long. I leaned down and kissed his cheek. Sleep well, my love, because when you wake up, everything is going to be different. Tomorrow, I am not just going to get us ice cream. I am going to get us justice. I am going to take back everything they think is theirs, and I am going to give it to you. Tomorrow the world will know exactly whose son you are. The Grand Ballroom of the Peninsula. Chicago was a cathedral of white orchids and crystal chandeliers designed to intimidate anyone whose net worth did not have at least 7 zeros. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money. 300 guests filled the room, a mix of local politicians, tech investors, and the social climbers my family desperately wanted to impress. They were all waiting for the perfect, obedient poor relation to slink into the back row, wearing the hideous beige sack dress Brittany had assigned to her. They were waiting for a victim. Instead, they got a queen. I stepped through the double mahogany doors just as the string quartet began to play. I was not wearing the polyester nightmare. I was draped in a bespoke emerald green silk gown commissioned from a private atelier in Paris. It hugged my figure like a second skin, the fabric moving like liquid around my ankles. Around my neck sat a diamond necklace that caught the light of the chandeliers and threw it back with blinding intensity. It was not costume jewelry. It was a flawless 40-carat piece from my private vault, the kind of piece that required its own insurance policy. A hush rippled through the room, starting from the back and rolling forward like a wave. Heads turned, whispers broke out. Who is that? Is that the cousin? She looks like a movie star. I held my head high, clutching Leo's hand. My son looked dashing in a miniature Armani tuxedo, his bruised knee hidden beneath crisp black trousers. We did not walk to the back corner where the poor relatives were usually sequestered near the kitchen doors. We walked straight down the center aisle. I saw Brittany standing near the altar arrangement, flanked by her bridesmaids in their rose gold gowns. When her eyes landed on me, her jaw literally dropped. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking pasty beneath her professional makeup. She looked at my dress, then at my neck, her eyes widening as she recognized the undeniable fire of real diamonds. She took a step forward, her instinct to scream at me flaring up, but she froze. She was trapped. There were cameras everywhere. The mayor's wife was sitting in the third row. The biggest investors in Chicago were watching. If she made a scene now, if she screamed at her cousin for looking too beautiful, she would shatter the illusion of the perfect, benevolent bride she had spent months cultivating. I saw Uncle Richard start to push his way through the crowd toward me, his face purple with rage. He looked ready to physically drag me out. But then a senator reached out and shook his hand, congratulating him on having such a stunning family. Richard had to swallow his bile. He had to smile. He had to nod and pretend that my presence and my obvious wealth were part of the plan. I stopped 3 rows from the front in the VIP section reserved for Apex Systems executives. I sat down, crossing my legs elegantly. I caught Brittany's eye across the room. She was trembling, gripping her bouquet so hard the stems were snapping. I offered her a small, cold smile. You wanted a show, Brittany. You wanted everything to be perfect. Well, the show is just beginning, and you are no longer the director. The dinner service at the Peninsula was a choreographed ballet of waiters placing plates of filet mignon in front of guests who were too busy whispering to eat. The air in the ballroom was thick with tension. Everyone had seen my entrance. Everyone had seen the diamonds, and everyone was waiting for the bride to react. Brittany did not disappoint. As the main course was cleared, she stood up from the head table. She tapped a silver spoon against her crystal champagne flute, the sharp ringing sound cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The room fell silent. Brittany smoothed the front of her gown, the same gown she had accused my son of ruining, though it looked pristine now. She held the microphone with a grip that turned her knuckles white. She flashed a smile that was bright, practiced, and completely devoid of warmth. She looked like a pageant queen moments before a meltdown. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice soft and breathless. "It means the world to us to be surrounded by people who support our love." She turned first to her parents, my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Richard, who were beaming at her with pride. "Mom and Dad, thank you. You raised me to know my worth. You taught me that I was born for greatness, and that I should never ever settle for anything less than I deserve. You taught me to surround myself with quality people and to keep the riffraff at the gate." A few guests glanced nervously in my direction. I sat perfectly still, my hand resting on Leo's shoulder, sipping my sparkling water. I was the riffraff she was talking about. Brittany then turned to Jamal. He was sitting next to her, staring at the tablecloth, looking like a man awaiting a sentencing hearing rather than a honeymoon. Brittany placed a hand on his shoulder, her nails digging into his suit jacket, and to my husband Jamal she cooed, "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for working so hard to give me the life I have always dreamed of. A life of security. A life of luxury. You have proven that with the right woman by your side, a man can achieve anything. I promise to be the wife who spends your success as well as you earn it." There was a ripple of polite, confused laughter. It was a crass statement revealing her true motivation, but she was too arrogant to notice. Then her expression changed. The smile hardened at the edges. She turned her head slowly, scanning the room until her gaze locked directly onto me. She stared at my emerald dress. She stared at the diamonds around my neck. Her eyes narrowed with a toxic mix of confusion and hatred. And finally, she said, her voice dropping to a steely register, "I want to thank the people who doubted us. I want to thank the people who are sitting in this room right now filled with jealousy. You know who you are. You look at us and you wish you had what we have. You try to upstage us. You try to steal our spotlight with flashy clothes and rented jewelry." She paused, letting the insult land. "But I want you to know something." She continued, staring straight into my soul. "Your envy is my fuel. It just reminds me that I won. I am the one in the white dress. I am the one with the ring, and you are just a spectator in my kingdom. So please keep watching. It only makes me shine brighter." She raised her glass high. "To us." The room erupted in hesitant applause. Brittany downed her champagne in one gulp, slamming the glass back onto the table. She sat down looking triumphant. She thought she had just put me in my place. She thought she had the last word. She did not know that Jamal was slowly pushing his chair back. She did not know that the microphone was about to change hands. She had just toasted to her own demise. The dinner service at the Peninsula was a choreographed ballet of waiters placing plates of filet mignon in front of guests who were too busy whispering to eat. The air in the ballroom was thick with tension. Everyone had seen my entrance. Everyone had seen the diamonds. And everyone was waiting for the bride to react. Brittany did not disappoint. As the main course was cleared, she stood up from the head table. She tapped a silver spoon against her crystal champagne flute, the sharp ringing sound cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The room fell silent. Brittany smoothed the front of her gown, the same gown she had accused my son of ruining, though it looked pristine now. She held the microphone with a grip that turned her knuckles white. She flashed a smile that was bright, practiced, and completely devoid of warmth. She looked like a pageant queen moments before a meltdown. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice soft and breathless. "It means the world to us to be surrounded by people who support our love." She turned first to her parents, my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Richard, who were beaming at her with pride. "Mom and Dad, thank you. You raised me to know my worth. You taught me that I was born for greatness and that I should never ever settle for anything less than I deserve. You taught me to surround myself with quality people and to keep the riffraff at the gate." A few guests glanced nervously in my direction. I sat perfectly still, my hand resting on Leo's shoulder, sipping my sparkling water. I was the riffraff she was talking about. Brittany then turned to Jamal. He was sitting next to her, staring at the tablecloth, looking like a man awaiting a sentencing hearing rather than a honeymoon. Brittany placed a hand on his shoulder, her nails digging into his suit jacket. And to my husband Jamal, she cooed, "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for working so hard to give me the life I have always dreamed of. A life of security. A life of luxury. You have proven that with the right woman by your side, a man can achieve anything. I promise to be the wife who spends your success as well as you earn it." There was a ripple of polite, confused laughter. It was a crass statement revealing her true motivation, but she was too arrogant to notice. Then her expression changed. The smile hardened at the edges. She turned her head slowly, scanning the room until her gaze locked directly onto me. She stared at my emerald dress. She stared at the diamonds around my neck. Her eyes narrowed with a toxic mix of confusion and hatred. And finally she said, her voice dropping to a steely register, "I want to thank the people who doubted us. I want to thank the people who are sitting in this room right now filled with jealousy. You know who you are. You look at us and you wish you had what we have. You try to upstage us. You try to steal our spotlight with flashy clothes and rented jewelry." She paused, letting the insult land. "But I want you to know something." She continued, staring straight into my soul. "Your envy is my fuel. It just reminds me that I won. I am the one in the white dress. I am the one with the ring. And you are just a spectator in my kingdom. So please keep watching. It only makes me shine brighter." She raised her glass high. To us, the room erupted in hesitant applause. Brittany downed her champagne in one gulp, slamming the glass back onto the table. She sat down looking triumphant. She thought she had just put me in my place. She thought she had the last word. She did not know that Jamal was slowly pushing his chair back. She did not know that the microphone was about to change hands. She had just toasted to her own demise. The applause for Brittany's speech died down slowly, replaced by the clinking of silverware and the murmur of impressed guests. They believed her narrative. They believed that the Vance family were the benevolent patrons behind the success of Chicago's hottest tech company. Jamal did not clap. He sat perfectly still, staring at the white tablecloth, his jaw set in a line of granite. He pushed his chair back. The scraping sound was loud in the sudden quiet of the room. He stood up, buttoning his tuxedo jacket with deliberate slowness. He reached for the microphone Brittany had just set down. His hand did not shake. Brittany looked up at him, beaming. She expected him to complete the picture. She expected him to thank her parents for their generosity and their guidance. She reached out and squeezed his hand, a public display of ownership. Jamal pulled his hand away. He did not look at her. He looked out at the sea of faces, at the senators, the investors, and the socialites. "Thank you, Brittany," Jamal said, his voice deep and steady, echoing through the ballroom. "That was quite a speech. You spoke very passionately about support, about family, about how we built this life together." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. He turned slowly toward the head table where Richard and Patricia sat. They were smiling, raising their glasses to him, confident that their investment was about to pay off in social currency. "There is a story that the Vance family loves to tell at country clubs." Jamal continued, his tone conversational, but edged with steel. "They love to tell people how they discovered me, how they saw potential in a young engineer when no one else did, how they nurtured Apex Systems from a garage project into a unicorn company." He walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of Richard. The smile on Richard's face began to falter. The older man sensed a shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room. "But since we are all here to celebrate the truth of our union, I think we should be honest about history." Jamal leaned in the microphone, amplifying every breath. "5 years ago, I came to your house, Richard. I had the prototype for the Apex algorithm in my backpack. I did not have rent money. I did not have a car. I walked 3 miles to your estate to ask you for a seed investment. I asked you for $10,000, just 10,000. The room went deathly silent. Richard's face turned a mottled shade of red. He gripped his scotch glass so hard his knuckles turned white. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Jamal asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried to the back of the room. "Because I remember every single word. You did not just say no, you laughed in my face. You told your butler to escort me off the property because I was making the neighbors nervous." Jamal straightened up, his eyes blazing. And as I was walking out the door, you shouted something at me. You called me a dreamer. But that wasn't the word you used, was it? You called me a delusional black boy who was reaching above his station. You told me to go get a job at a gas station and stop pretending I could sit at the table with men like you. Gasps erupted from the audience. The mayor's wife covered her mouth. Richard stood up, his chair flying back. That is a lie, Richard shouted, his voice cracking with panic. He is drunk. Cut the microphone. Jamal did not flinch. He did not back down. He simply smiled a cold, predatory smile. I am stone sober, Richard. And I am not done. You want to take credit for my success? You want to claim you built me. The only thing you gave me was the motivation to buy you out. The ballroom erupted into a cacophony of gasps and whispered accusations. The polished veneer of the wedding of the century had cracked, revealing the ugly rot beneath. Aunt Patricia shot out of her chair, her face a mask of contorted indignation. She knocked over her wine glass, sending a blood-red stain spreading across the pristine white tablecloth. What are you saying? She shrieked, her voice shrill enough to cut through the noise. Sit down, Jamal. You are making a scene. You are clearly unwell. Richard, call security. Get him out of here before he ruins everything. Jamal did not sit down. He did not look at security. He looked at the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the investors who had spent the last hour fawning over Richard and Patricia. He held up a hand and the room fell into a deathly silence again. They wanted to hear the rest of the crash. You want to know where the money came from? Jamal asked, his voice steady and calm. You all assume it came from the Vance Family Trust. You assume Richard wrote the check that launched Apex Systems, but Richard did not give me a dime. In fact, he told me to get off his property before he called the police. Jamal took a step away from the head table, isolating himself in the spotlight. There was only one person who believed in the code. One person who saw the future when everyone else saw a charity case. She did not have a trust fund. She did not have a mansion. She was 24 years old, living in a studio apartment, working as a junior analyst. But she had something the rest of this family lacks: vision and courage. He paused, letting the words sink in. She took the only thing of value she owned, a box of vintage jewelry left to her by her grandmother. Heirlooms that had been in her family for 3 generations. She did not keep them for herself. She walked into a pawn shop in downtown Chicago, and she sold every single piece. The necklace her grandmother wore on her wedding day, the sapphire ring. She sold it all. Jamal's voice broke slightly thick with emotion. She handed me a check for $200,000 the next day. It was every cent she had in the world, and it was not enough. So she went out and got a second job waiting tables. Then a third job doing freelance data entry at night. She worked 18-hour days for 2 years. She ate ramen noodles and walked to work to save bus fare, all so she could pay the server costs for Apex Systems. She starved so that this company could eat. Brittany was shaking her head, her eyes wide with panic. Stop it, she whispered. Stop talking. Jamal ignored her. He raised his hand and pointed a steady finger toward the VIP section, directly at the woman in the emerald green dress. That investor is not my fiancé. It is not her father. It is the woman you all ignored tonight. It is the woman you made sit in the back. It is Audrey Vance. She is the angel investor of Apex Systems. And she is the reason you are all sitting here tonight. The silence following Jamal's declaration was absolute. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum sucking the air out of the lungs of 300 wealthy guests. Jamal did not lower his hand. He kept his finger pointed at the VIP section, directing every eye in the room to the woman in the emerald green gown who sat calmly sipping her water. Jamal took a step back from the podium, his posture shifting from that of a groom to that of a subordinate addressing a superior. He looked at Richard, whose face had gone a sickly shade of gray, and then at Brittany, who was shaking her head in silent denial. You see, Jamal said, his voice resonating with authority. You all think I run Apex Systems. You think I make the decisions. But the truth is, I serve at the pleasure of the board. I am just the face. She is the mind. He turned back to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to correct the record once and for all. It is my distinct honor to introduce you to the true architect of this company, the chairwoman of the board of directors, the majority shareholder controlling 51% of all Apex voting stock, and effectively, my direct boss, Ms. Audrey Vance. On cue, the lighting technician who had been briefed by my team earlier that afternoon cut the soft, romantic lighting. A single high-intensity spotlight swung across the ballroom and locked onto table 4. It hit me with the force of a physical blow, illuminating the emerald silk and the 40-carat diamonds. I did not blink. I did not shy away. I slowly set my glass down on the table. I squeezed Leo's hand once, then stood up. I did not smile. I did not wave. I stood with the posture of a woman who owns the building, the company, and everyone in it. Behind the head table, the massive LED screen that had been displaying a slideshow of Brittany and Jamal's engagement photos suddenly flickered. The romantic montage vanished. In its place, a high-resolution corporate graphic appeared. It was the official Apex Systems ownership structure. A massive pie chart dominated the screen. The blue section representing 51% was labeled clearly Vance Holdings LLC, managing partner Audrey Vance. Then the image shifted again. It displayed the cover of next month's Forbes magazine, an exclusive that had not yet hit the stands. The headline screamed in bold gold letters, "The Phantom Investor." How a single mother built a tech empire from her kitchen table, and there on the cover was a portrait of me looking powerful, untouchable, and undeniably rich. The gasps in the room turned into a roar of shock. I saw the blood drain completely from Aunt Patricia's face. She looked from the screen to me, her eyes bulging. She was doing the math. She was realizing that the niece she had treated like a servant, the woman she had forced to sleep on a couch and clean floors, was worth more than her entire family combined. Brittany looked at the screen, then at me, and I saw the exact moment her soul shattered. She wasn't just the bride anymore. She was the employee, and I was the CEO. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The sound of my heels on the wood was the only noise in the room. Jamal handed me the microphone without a word and stepped back, taking his place as my second-in-command. I turned to face the head table. Uncle Richard was gripping the tablecloth, his knuckles white. He looked like a cornered animal. Aunt Patricia was fanning herself rapidly with a napkin, her face a mask of panicked denial. "Uncle Richard," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "You spent this entire weekend lecturing me about economics. You called me a drain on resources. You told everyone here that I was a failure who scraped by on the charity of others. You projected an image of immense wealth and stability to these investors." I took a step closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at him. But projection is just a trick of the light. And in my line of work, I prefer hard data. I clicked the small remote in my hand. The Forbes cover on the giant screen behind me vanished. In its place, a stark, ugly document appeared. It was a foreclosure notice stamped with the seal of the Cook County Court dated 6 months ago. Beside it was a corporate bankruptcy filing for Vance Construction. The crowd gasped. The whispers turned into a roar of shock. Men in tuxedos leaned forward, squinting at the screen, recognizing the legal reality of financial ruin. "Let us be honest about why we are really here today," I continued, my eyes locking onto Richard's terrified gaze. "Your construction empire collapsed last year. You have been hiding it with high-interest loans, credit cards, and lies. You have not paid your staff in 3 months. You are not just broke, Uncle Richard. You are insolvent." I pointed at Brittany, who was now sobbing silently into her hands, her mascara running down her cheeks. "And that is why this wedding had to happen so fast. This was not a celebration of love. It was a liquidity event. You forced your daughter to marry the CEO of Apex Systems because you needed immediate access to his capital. You did not look at Jamal and see a son-in-law. You saw a human ATM who could wipe away your mistakes." I clicked the remote one last time. A balance sheet appeared, highlighting a specific row in bright crimson red. The numbers were large enough for everyone to see. "The number on the screen is $3 million, I said, letting the figure hang in the air like a guillotine blade. That is your current outstanding debt to creditors who are threatening to seize your estate next week. You were counting on Jamal signing a check tomorrow morning to save you. You were going to use his money, the money I helped him earn, to pay for your failures. You called me a beggar, Uncle Richard. But looking at these numbers, it seems the only beggar in this room is you. The massive screen behind me was still glowing with the crimson-red numbers of the Vance family debt, casting a harsh, bloody light over the ballroom. The silence that had gripped the room shattered as Brittany finally broke. The carefully constructed mask of the perfect debutante disintegrated in an instant. She did not walk toward Jamal. She scrambled, tripping over the layers of her ruined silk dress, her face a streaked mess of tears and mascara. She threw herself at him, grabbing the lapels of his tuxedo with desperate, clawing hands. "Jamal, please!" she sobbed, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Do not look at the screen. Look at me. She is lying. She manipulated the numbers. You know I love you. We are soulmates. You cannot let her destroy us, because she is bitter." Jamal stood like a statue. He did not flinch. He did not offer comfort. He looked down at her hands, gripping his jacket as if they were covered in filth. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached up and peeled her fingers off him one by one. He held her wrists for a second, pushing her away firmly until there was a foot of cold, empty space between them. "Stop it," Brittany, Jamal said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a finality that froze the room. "There is no us. There never was. There was just a target and a hunter. And I am done being the prey." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded document. It was the prenuptial agreement she had signed so eagerly just days ago, believing it secured her future. "Do you remember this document?" Jamal asked, holding it up. "Specifically, Clause 14b, regarding financial transparency. It states clearly that any material misrepresentation of assets, debts, or financial standing by either party or their immediate family prior to the union renders the agreement and the engagement null and void." Brittany shook her head, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Jamal, no. It was just a misunderstanding. We were going to tell you. You were going to tell me after I signed the check to save your father's company." Jamal cut in, his voice sharp as a razor. "You lied to me, Brittany. You sat across from me at dinner every night for 6 months and listened to me talk about trust, all while you were hiding a $3 million anchor that you planned to tie around my neck. That is not love. That is fraud." He reached into his pocket again. This time he pulled out the platinum wedding band he was supposed to place on her finger in less than an hour. He looked at the ring, then at her weeping face. "This transaction is cancelled," he said coldly. He dropped the ring. It hit the charger plate on the table with a loud, hollow clatter that echoed like a gunshot. It spun for a second before settling among the untouched silverware. "The wedding is off," Jamal announced to the stunned room. "You can keep the dress. You are going to need something to wear to bankruptcy court." The sound of the wedding ring hitting the china plate was the final bell in the boxing match, but Uncle Richard refused to stay down. He was a man accustomed to bullying his way out of corners, and he tried one last desperate charge. His face turned a violent shade of purple, the veins in his neck bulging against his tight collar. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the silverware and making the crystal glasses tremble. "You think you can humiliate us like this in front of our friends?" he roared, his voice cracking with impotence. "I will sue you for defamation. I will sue you for corporate espionage. I will drag you through every court in this state until you are destitute. You are banned from my house. You are dead to this family. Get out." The guests watched in horrified fascination as the patriarch of the Vance family unraveled. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply brought the microphone to my lips and let a cold, amused smile play on my lips. "Sue me," I asked, my voice calm and devastatingly reasonable. "With what money, Richard? You cannot even afford the champagne in your hand. And as for banning me, I think you are confused about who owns what." I gestured to the screen behind me, where a new document appeared. It was a merger and acquisition agreement signed and dated just 5 days ago. "You seem to have forgotten that the construction firm you manage, the one you drove into the ground, was quietly put up for sale by your creditors last week. Apex Systems acquired the controlling stake this morning. We bought the debt for pennies on the dollar. I took a step closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at him. That means that as of 9 a.m. today, I am not your niece. I am your employer. And I have reviewed your performance file. You have embezzled company funds to pay for this party. You have falsified records. Your performance is terminated. You are fired, Richard. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building if you try to enter the office tomorrow. Richard slumped back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But I wasn't done. I had one more nail for the coffin. And regarding the house you just banned me from, I continued, my voice hardening. The Lake Forest estate. You leveraged it 3 times to keep your creditors at bay. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on Tuesday. My private equity firm Vance Holdings purchased the mortgage note from the bank this afternoon. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my clutch and held it up. This is the deed. Technically, you are trespassing on my property right now. But I am a generous landlord. I will give you 24 hours to pack your personal belongings. Anything left in the house after noon tomorrow becomes the property of the new owner, which is me. Richard looked at his wife, then at his daughter, and finally at me. The fight drained out of him instantly. He realized the trap had snapped shut. He was jobless, homeless, and exposed as a fraud, all in the span of 10 minutes. I lowered the microphone, watching him crumble. You wanted me out of your house, Uncle Richard. Now you do not have a house to kick me out of. The thud of Aunt Patricia hitting the floor was the final punctuation mark on the catastrophe. It was not a graceful theatrical faint like one sees in the movies. It was the heavy, clumsy collapse of a woman whose entire reality had just been deleted. Her body shut down under the sheer weight of the humiliation. Paramedics were called, but the guests did not rush to help. Instead, they recoiled, pulling their expensive gowns and tuxedo trousers away from the falling woman, as if poverty were a contagious disease. Brittany did not move to help her mother. She had collapsed onto the dance floor, surrounded by the white petals of the flower arrangement she had screamed at the florist about earlier that morning. She sat there, her legs splayed out in the ruined silk dress, her face a streaked nightmare of running mascara and tears. She looked like a broken doll, discarded and forgotten. The guests, the elite of Chicago, whom she had tried so desperately to impress, were now her jury. And the verdict was guilty. I heard the whispers ripple through the room like a cold wind. Did you hear that, bankrupt? Frauds. I never trusted them. Someone said they haven't paid their country club dues in a year. How embarrassing. The tide had turned. The people Brittany wanted to rule were now laughing at her. They began to file out of the ballroom, stepping over the spilled wine and the scattered wedding favors, eager to distance themselves from the stench of failure. They looked at me with newfound respect, nodding deferentially as they passed, acknowledging the new hierarchy. I turned away from the spectacle. I had seen enough. I knelt down and scooped Leo up into my arms. He was tired, his head resting heavily on my shoulder, oblivious to the fact that his mother had just conquered the world for him. Let us go home, I whispered into his hair. Jamal stepped up beside me. He had taken off his boutonniere and thrown it on the table. He stood tall, his expression hard and protective. He did not look like a man who had just lost a fiancée. He looked like a man who had just gained his freedom. He positioned himself between me and the wreckage of the Vance family, acting as a human shield against any last desperate attempts they might make to hurt us. We walked toward the exit, a unified front. But as we passed the spot where Brittany sat weeping on the floor, I stopped. I could not leave without one final lesson. Brittany looked up at me. Her eyes were red and swollen, filled with a mixture of hatred and defeat. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to scream another insult, perhaps to beg, but I cut her off with a look of absolute pity. I leaned down slightly, so only she could hear me over the sound of the retreating guests. You spent your whole life judging me, Brittany, I said softly. You called me damaged. You called me used goods because I had a child and a past. But look at where we are now. I gestured to the empty room, the unconscious mother, and the foreclosure notice still burning on the screen above her head. Next time before you call someone used goods, you should take a long, hard look in the mirror. You might want to check if the person staring back at you is actually counterfeit. I straightened up, adjusted my son in my arms, and walked out the double doors. Jamal followed close behind, leaving the bride alone in the ruins of her fake empire. The valet held open the rear door of the obsidian Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was the car I had bought myself 3 months ago, but kept in storage waiting for the right moment to unveil it. Tonight was that moment. The interior smelled of fresh leather and absolute silence. I slid onto the seat, settling Leo against my side. Jamal followed, sliding in next to us. He let out a long, heavy exhale, pulling at the bow tie that had felt like a noose all evening. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos of the hotel behind, the city of Chicago opened up before us. The streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and amber. It felt like we were leaving a war zone and entering a sanctuary. The silence in the car was not awkward. It was heavy with relief. We were 3 survivors escaping a sinking ship, watching from the lifeboat as the vessel disappeared beneath the waves. Leo shifted in his sleep, rubbing his eyes with a small fist. He looked up at me, his voice groggy, but filled with a lingering anxiety that no 6-year-old should have to carry. "Mommy," he whispered, clutching my hand tightly. "Do we have to see Aunt Brittany again? She scared me." I looked down at him. I thought about the years of insults, the way they made me feel small, the way they treated my son like a burden. I looked at Jamal, who was watching us with a soft, protective expression. He reached out and squeezed Leo's foot gently, a silent promise that he would never let anyone hurt him again. I pulled Leo closer, kissing the top of his head, inhaling the scent of his shampoo. I felt the weight of the last decade lift off my shoulders. The debt was paid. The toxic ties were severed. The ledger was finally balanced. No baby. I said, my voice firm and final. Never again. We are done with them. From now on, we only allow people into our lives who know how to cherish us. We are done with people who make us feel small. Leo nodded, satisfied with the answer, and closed his eyes, drifting back to sleep, safe in the knowledge that his mother was the strongest thing in his world. I looked up at Jamal. He smiled, a genuine tired smile that reached his eyes. "We did it," he said softly. "We did," I replied. The driver turned onto Lakeshore Drive. The skyline of Chicago rose up ahead of us, a glittering mountain of steel and light against the dark water of the lake. It looked different tonight. It didn't look like a struggle anymore. It looked like a playground. It looked like an empire waiting to be claimed. I looked out the window, watching my reflection merge with the city lights. The poor cousin was gone. The victim was gone. The only thing left was the woman who owned the future. The car accelerated smoothly into the night, carrying us toward a life that was finally, truly ours. The story of Audrey serves as a powerful masterclass in the art of quiet strength and the deception of appearances. The Vance family, blinded by their superficial obsession with status and material wealth, made the fatal mistake of underestimating the person they should have feared the most. They believed that power was something you displayed with loud voices and flashy labels, failing to realize that true power often moves in silence. Audrey teaches us that dignity is not a commodity that can be bought or sold, but an internal fortress that no insult can breach. She endured years of disrespect and the heartbreaking mistreatment of her son, not because she was weak, but because she was strategic. She understood that an emotional reaction gives your enemy power, while a calculated response takes it away. Furthermore, this narrative exposes the fragility of relationships built on transaction rather than connection. Brittany and her parents viewed human beings as financial assets or social liabilities, treating Jamal as a bailout and Audrey as a servant. This dehumanization was their ultimate downfall. When you treat people like tools, do not be surprised when they eventually dismantle your life. The most profound lesson here is that success is the best revenge. You do not need to scream to be heard. You simply need to build your empire, protect your peace, and wait for the perfect moment to let the truth speak for itself. Audrey shows us that sometimes the most satisfying victory is simply revealing who you really are and walking away from those who never deserved to know you. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more powerful dramas that reveal the hidden truths of human nature.